Welcome to Houston Newsmakers Extra. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick in the studio, back into his former home. We've changed the things around a little bit since you were here. Yeah. You actually have running water since the time you're here. Not trying to say you're old or anything, but
robotic camera.
I know. But we were talking about a lot during the show. We just didn't get a chance to get to a lot of things because we just get into depth about a lot of different things. One of the things we were talking about is the integrity bill. And you talked about the fact that really there are a lot of things in this that there's not really a big argument about. The fact that you did away with 24-hour voting, did away with drive-through voting, which opponents say that's
and by the way, we didn't do away with it. It was never in the law.
No, I know what you mean, but
it was never in the law.
You put it in the law so that you can't do it.
Right.
So to make sure. And some people say, well, that's a Harris County thing, and so that's what you did.
They didn't work too well. And we talked about on the show about why we don't have drive-in voting, because the privacy of the ballot box is key. You can't have privacy in a car with 5 people.
So one of the things that I want to touch upon is something about election officials. That was in the bill about poll watchers being able to be more free and all that kind of stuff. So the officials were concerned about this, about the increase in the poll watchers. So additional steps for election officials that may need to be taken. I want to talk about a piece. I want to toss to a soundbite here. Nationwide threats increase stress for some of those nonpartisan election officials. So last week, Republican election attorney Ben Ginsburg joined Democrat Bob Bauer to co-chair what they call the Election Official Legal Defense Network to provide legal support for election officials. Here's some of what was said at their announcement. I want your reaction on the other side.
That election was a rousing success, one of the great success stories of American democracy. We were able to accommodate record turnout, 160 million American voters, the highest rate of turnout and the highest raw number of voters in American history.
What we are seeing developing now is a huge step backward from a focus on professionalized election administration to a heavy level of political interference in the work of trained election professionals.
You're going to have a litigation bazaar potentially over all elections in Texas. And that's a Republican-controlled state. So why is that a good idea, even for the most partisan of Republicans?
Now, they're talking about the election officials and poll watchers having a little bit more freedom. And now there are more steps in place for an election official to try to get a poll watcher who may be out of hand or whatever. So what are your thoughts about that?
So first of all, the idea that there are nonpartisan election officials is really not accurate, because everyone who's there votes for somebody, and so they may have a preference. What I find from our election officials and our poll watchers is these are really great people, Khambrel. We forget that when you go to vote, there's a whole team of people. A lot of seniors do that. Thank goodness they step up. They get paid very little or nothing at all, and they are very fair, whether it's at a Democrat precinct or Republican precinct. By and large, they do a great job. But we've seen instances in both sides where if you view it from the outside, you're thinking, what's going on here? And so this has nothing to do with the Trump election, but it did have something to do with when we look back at what happened in Atlanta or Philadelphia or other places where people were pushed aside, or you got to stand over here, you can't see my ballot, or we're putting up paper on the windows so you can't look in, or ballots are being counted in the middle of the night. Now, I'm proud to say in Texas that none of that happened. We didn't have that. We had our election returns in pretty much by midnight. But when you're counting votes 2 and 3 days later and people can't observe it, that raises questions, whether it's Republican or Democrats. So what we did, again, I highly value those folks that work in elections, because again, it pays very little or it's volunteer work, and they work every day in early vote. They're there on election day. It's one of the reasons you can't do 24-hour voting, because it's hard to get people to do the 6 to 10, and we've expanded those hours. So these are good people, but we need to be sure that everything has total transparency so there are no questions. And remember, the poll watchers, one of the things we added in our bill, poll watchers now have to go to training. So that's another good thing you don't hear about very often. But remember, poll watchers are both Democrat and Republican. It's as if, well, they passed a Republican bill only. No, this is for both sides, because we want both sides to be able to ask a question if they have one.
In fact, that group that's now up,
Right.
they talked about the Ginsburg and Bauer. They talked about there's something that's going to be on both sides.
Both sides,
Something to be able
right.
to know that. I don't want anybody over my. I don't. Yeah, Paul White, don't come. Nah,
No,
leave
and
me alone.
that's
So
not
clear
allowed.
that up for me.
Yeah, it's not allowed. It's not allowed now.
So who are the poll watchers watching?
The
They're
poll
watching
watchers,
the officials.
The poll watchers are observing. If you're a Democrat or a Republican, okay, again, it's a nonpartisan.
Hardcore independent, right?
Okay,
here.
you're hardcore. If you're an independent, a poll watcher is there to make sure there's nothing going on that looks out of the ordinary.
Right.
If you see something going on at the voting booth potentially, I mean, we have sworn testimony. I'll give you an example of this real quick, by an Hispanic lady who wanted someone to teach her how to vote. This is sworn testimony in court, and from Texas. And she said, they showed me how to vote because I didn't understand the machines. You know, a lot of people don't understand them the first time they vote. And when it was over, she said, thank you very much. Now I know how to vote. And the person said, oh, no, I already voted for you. That's sworn testimony. So that's the kind of thing that we want to be sure in a Republican or Democrat precinct, that everything is above board and totally transparent.
So you see, what seems to me is an issue is that this widespread issue with voting issues across the country. Supposedly, there was widespread problems in voting across the country, enough to swing an election, which didn't happen according to law. There's the lawsuits and things like that. It didn't happen. So the laws that came about as a result of this, quote, fictional.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, there were
Well,
the
I don't
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
you know.
I don't know that it's fictional. Here's
Unproven.
Here's the key, Khambrel. If the public doesn't have confidence in the election process, then you'll have fewer people voting, and that's when you have more political turmoil. So if there's one thing we have to really get right, and we think we did in Senate Bill 1, is to make sure people in Texas have confidence that it's easy to vote and hard to cheat. And that's what we did. And again, we put in a training school for poll watchers. And again, because if we don't do this right, Khambrel, you're not going to have senior citizens or other volunteers showing up to do this work.
How about if I think I might lose?
We have to protect them.
How about if I think I might lose, and the best thing I can do is to create an environment.
That's against the law.
Well, no, it's not against.
Of course,
it's not against the law for me to say things that are going to insinuate that there's problems in the electorate.
People can say.
You can say that.
By the way, Stacey Abrams.
So that's what happened.
Hey, by the
here.
way, when Stacey Abrams lost her race in Georgia for governor,
right?
To
She
this
didn't
day,
concede. Did not concede.
She hasn't conceded to this
no,
day.
I get
and she
that.
says, remember, she said the Republicans stole this from me.
Right.
No one complains about that. Hillary Clinton, when she lost in 16, she said
trying
for 4 years.
You're getting off where you know where I'm going with this.
Well, I'm just saying, let's be fair about this. My point is, both sides sometimes say after an election that it wasn't fair, they didn't lose. And it seems like it's all pointed to Republicans or Donald Trump. No, the Democrats have said this for years too. So my point is, we haven't had that issue in Texas. We've had instances of fraud, but we want to make sure voting is easy and cheating is hard. And that's what this bill does. There's no voter suppression in it whatsoever.
And that's going to be something that's going to continue to be the media thing. The spin is going to be going either way depending on.
Well, I wasn't spinning. I was just giving the answer.
I'm just saying that out there in the media environment, it's going to be spun both different ways.
Well, a lot of people said, real quick, well, this is all these laws because of the 2020 election between Trump and Biden. Again, we had these same complaints after Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams lost their races, two high-profile Democrats.
Yeah,
so we need to clean up the system.
Nowhere close to the level that was after the 2020.
I don't know. Hillary Clinton's never said she.
No, I'm talking about the number of litigations that were attempted across the country after 2020 pales.
The bottom line is people need to have confidence. Republicans, Democrats,
absolutely.
And that's what we want to do.
Everybody who says something that makes the ballot or the result of the ballot not seem like it's secure, that something needs to happen to them, give them some old-fashioned justice. Hey, let's talk about, we were talking about a couple things coming up here.
Yes.
Number one, money left over. You said the money left over needs to go to certain things that are priority. There's a lot of money, is there not, left over from potential, the COVID, the rescue plan, the monies that were available?
And unfortunately, the
American
Biden
Rescue Plans?
administration is tying our hands on how we can spend that money. So it would not,
How is that?
in many ways.
What are they?
Well, they say you can only spend it for this or this. You can't spend it for that. So we have to work within their guidelines.
It can't go in the general?
It can't go in the general, and you have to spend it on this issue, that issue. And it's in fact, we're expected to get billions of dollars from the federal government. They haven't written the rules yet of how we can spend it.
So they know how long that's going to be?
I don't know. We thought we'd have it by now.
The CARES Act lets you do general...
They were the first act, and I forget, there have been so many different acts. The first one that came out in March or April during the beginning of COVID, they were a little bit more lenient, because everyone was trying to react, do what you need to do. But now they put a lot of strings attached to what we can do to it. But here's the bigger issue. So, long story, very short for time. We're the only state in the country that does a 2-year budget. We're the 9th largest economy in the world. Our budget is $250 billion. That's a 2-year budget, $125 billion a year. Just compare that to maybe Oklahoma is less than $15 billion. We're a nation state. Our economy is bigger than Russia. So when our comptroller forecasts the budget, he's forecasting, because our budget this budget we passed to make just starts now, this month. It goes all the way to August of 2023. So if you're 5 or 6% off, and no one can be that exact 2 years out, you could be billions short or billions to the good if the economy takes off or if the economy sinks in any given year. So when Abbott and I came in 2015, we came in with $6 billion extra because the previous assessment of sales tax collections, which is most of our money, was just off. When we came in 2017, we didn't have $1 extra to spend.
Right.
So what we want to do, Senate Bill 91 by Betancourt says this, that when we have those years where we have a budget surplus, that we take a portion of that money, and that'll have to be decided by Republicans, Democrats, how much of that money, I want most of it, goes back to taxpayers like a dividend, that's not the right word for it, so that you get some help on your property taxes in that year.
But it's tough to know right now just how much
you don't know till you show up.
You
don't know till you show up. So when we come back, Lord willing, if I win my next election, we come back in 23, we'll know what we have when we come in, and we'll know what we can send to taxpayers in 2023. And the past thinking, Khambrel, has always been when we have extra money, let's find a place to spend it. So since Abbott and I came into office in 15, we haven't done that. And now we want to put it into law to give people more tax relief, because our property taxes, we've done a lot of great things, still too high.
I want to be easy, your time is valuable. So right now we do not know about how much surplus, is there a surplus available in the state budget right now? And if so, what can that be used for?
So right now we're pretty much at the level of, we have these markers of not breaking the constitutional spending limit. I won't get into detail on that, but we're given a certain limit and the members vote on that limit. The comptroller gives us an estimate. So we're pretty much at that floor. We don't have a lot of excess dollars now, but what we want to, and this budget is already passed, but moving forward, again, we came in 15 with $6 billion extra. 17, we didn't have any extra. In 19, we had extra, and we spent it. In 19, Governor Abbott and I have passed, I think, $9 billion now in tax relief so far. We cut property taxes. We talked about this earlier in your show. In the past, people knew that if my appraisal goes up, my taxes go up the same amount. We've stopped that.
Right.
Schools, your school taxes, on average, cannot go up more than 2.5%. Until 2019, they could go up, they were averaging 7%. That's a big saving. We're stepping in as the state using some of our sales tax money to backfill that for the superintendents in the schools. So we spent, in 2019, $5 billion in property tax relief for schools. We've increased the homestead exemption from $15,000 to $25,000. We've stopped the gas tax money going to, it was supposed to go to roads, it was going everywhere else. We put that back in. So we cut the franchise tax for small businesses by 25%, which is $2.5 billion. When you add it all up, it's $9-10 billion that we've cut taxes, and we've increased spending in a very important area to roads and infrastructure from $23 billion to $31 billion without one penny in any fee increase or tax increase. So we've been using that money. And then, and I know we're out of time, but bail bond reform, we also passed a big bill this session because we need to keep these criminals that the judges in Harris County continue to let out. Murderers should not be out on bond. Rapists should not be out on bond. These people need to be in jail, and the judges in Harris County, we're going to try and rein them in. But the best way to rein them in is people. Yeah, that's signed.
Yeah,
that's
so
signed.
it's
Signed.
changed.
We're going to sign it this week in Houston.
Okay.
So we're going to sign it this week, I believe, is the plan.
This week in Houston.
This week in Houston.
Speaking of this week in Houston, driving on these roads, we probably want more money into the infrastructure on the roads, right?
Well, again, when we came in as governor and lieutenant governor, we were spending about $23 billion in infrastructure in Texas. It's now over $31 billion.
Last thing I want to take, legislative session.
Yes.
Another one coming up.
Coming up.
What are the priorities?
The priorities will be, we have to, every 10 years, we have a census. So we have to redraw all the maps. State Board of Education, Congress, the Texas House, Texas Senate. We'll do that, and we'll have a couple of bills coming up as well that we'll take care of. And hopefully that property tax bill.
I keep telling people they don't want to hear it when I talk about the brilliance of Republican shrewd, how you do everything, because you kind of outthink the Democrats in a lot of different ways. The districts, the way they're set up.
Right.
If you win your primary, you really don't have to worry about it. For the most part, I mean, that's the way it's been. The districts have been laid out, and because you have control of the House now, there's probably going to continue to be that way.
Well, we will draw fair and legal maps because that's what we're supposed to do. But Khambrel, if you just look at Texas in the last 20 years, things have changed. For example, Harris County used to be a Republican county. It's now a Democrat county. And rural Texas, East, West, and Central, was all Democrat. It's now all Republican. So it had nothing to do with drawing districts. It has a lot to do with just the changing of the population, where people move, their thoughts, policies they believe in. So, but we're going to draw fair and legal maps. It will all work out.
Is everybody singing Kumbaya after the filibuster break? I mean,
yeah. Let me tell you what. In the Texas Senate, Khambrel, last year, I don't have the exact number, but we passed about 1,800 bills in 2019. I don't have the count for this year yet. Less than 30 passed with only Republican votes. The Texas Senate operates on a bipartisan basis across the aisle. Carol Alvarado filibustered for about 10 or 13, 14 hours, and that was her right to do that. And when it was over, we're friends. Khambrel, the House has 150 members, and we had 31. We do the same amount of work. So our 31 are on so many more committees. They're with each other so long. They eat together every day. If there's a funeral, very often we attend that other person's, the lost family member. If there's a wedding, we attend. We work together. We fight on key issues. But for the most part of what we do, 98% or higher passes with Republicans and Democrat votes. That's the model for U.S. Congress, the Texas Senate. And I'm proud of that.
We need to see more of that video, pictures together, eating, taking turns, saying grace, that sort of thing.
Hey, we had a church service at the end of both of our last sessions. Yeah. Democrats and Republicans singing Amazing Grace together, praying together, quoting their Bible verses. No one picked up that news story. No one. We had every member, Republican, Democrat, open every day of session with a prayer. Royce West, Democrat from Dallas, when we finished out the last session, brought us all together, and we all held hands on the Senate floor on the last day, and everybody in the gallery. We said the Lord's Prayer together after we'd been singing Amazing Grace. So all of this stuff that the media, not you, but the media likes to play up about, it is going on in Washington where they don't get together, but in the Texas Senate, that's just not the way we act. We have respectful, hard-fought discussions and debate, but we act as gentlemen and ladies, and we respect each other as human beings.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, or as I know you, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you again.
Yes, sir.
Always great. We're going into our third decade.
It's hard to
know
believe.
that?
Hard to believe.
One of us is getting older.
We're just we're hanging in there. You're the amazing man. You're the amazing man.
Thank you for this. Houston Newsmakers Extra. Share this with everyone you know, and even those you don't.